Hey everyone, Dr. L here with your week 10 video. I apologize, this one is going to go up a little bit later than usual because I got a little behind this week. On Thursday, I went to a field trip with the social work program since they're part of our department. We went to the Freedom Center in downtown Cincinnati. So that was pretty cool, but it meant that I didn't get to lesson plan all day Thursday like I normally do. So it is 8 o'clock on a Friday night and I am making videos. Yay! And I apologize if you hear any noise. My partner is watching a horror movie in the next room. So you might hear a little bit of that, but hopefully not too much. Anyway, without further ado, today we're going to be talking about stratification with regard to gender. So I'm going to do some housekeeping, review, lecture, exit pass, and reminders. I'm caught up with grading. Make sure you're paying attention to the individual feedback I'm providing on discussion posts if and when you have that. And know that if you get 100% on a discussion post, I may not necessarily give you individual feedback that week. It's more so if I'm taking off points, I want to be transparent about where those points are coming from, especially so that you can work toward getting 100% of the points and earning that full score in the future. So just keep that in mind moving forward. Also, keep in mind the prompt and rubrics for those assignments. Have those out while you're working on discussion posts. That way you ensure you have included all the necessary components in order to earn the grade that you want. Also, keep in mind my AI policy when it comes to written assignments. So making sure that you are only using it for mechanical help with spelling and grammar and things like that. And then not using AI to think creatively and critically for you. Ultimately, no matter how little you use AI, make sure that if you are using it for grammar and spelling and things like that, you are checking the output you receive from AI to ensure that it meets the standards of the prompt and the rubric. All right, so midterm exams 3 is next week. The study guide will be available this week, so you can download that and you can start preparing for everything. It will once again be the same logistically, and it will focus primarily on content from the textbook for the 4 chapters designated. And then, of course, if you have anything you'd like to share with your classmates, you can always email me and let me know about events and things like that happening on campus. All right, so just as a review from last week when we were discussing stratification and race, racism is a set of attitudes, beliefs, and practices that are used to justify the belief that one racial category is somehow superior or inferior to others. Versus discrimination is a prejudice action against a group of people. So it's sort of acting on those racist beliefs. Prejudice is having a biased thought based on flawed assumptions about a group of people. And we talked about how this is often rooted in stereotypes that are perpetuated in social institutions like, the media, thinking about TV shows and movies and things like that, and how these prejudice, these harmful, negative stereotypes that persist can have some very serious, harmful consequences. And so that is when we start to think about systemic racism, which is racism embedded in social institutions, which we can also refer to as institutional racism and structural racism. We also have to think about the benefits that are inherent to folks from historically privileged communities. And so we've talked since the beginning of the semester about the term privilege more broadly, but for our purposes, talking about race, we can think about white privilege, which is a societal privilege that benefits white people or those perceived to be white over non-white people in some societies, including the United States. Now, if we think about privilege in the context of this week, where we're focusing on gender, we can start to think about gender and privilege. And of course, men are the privileged group when it comes to gender. And so we can sort of apply these same tenets to gender. And then finally, just as a review, again, this is one of those terms that I introduced at the beginning of the semester in almost all my classes because intersectionality is so foundational to the field of sociology. But your textbook authors choose to introduce it in our chapter on our chapters where we're focusing on stratification. So I have it here as a refresher. And of course, this is my personal definition, not the one that your textbook authors use. So just make sure you're familiar with both, right? But intersectionality is the interconnectedness of systems of oppression, looking at race, class, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, ableism, sizeism, and other aspects of identities to answer questions about how these forms of privilege and oppression overlap and intersect. Now, so far, when we've been dealing with stratification, we have honed in on race and class. This week, we're going to continue that conversation by focusing on gender, sexual orientation, and gender identity. Now, we don't have a specific weekly unit on ableism and sizeism so much, but I hope that we have been able to weave those topics into the various weeks and the content we've had so far. And then moving forward, we can continue thinking about all of these identity categories and how they impact things on a micro scale, so our everyday our everyday social interactions, as well as how these identity categories impact things on a macro scale, or focusing on social institution and some of those structural forces at play. Okay, so moving into new territory, stuff related to gender, sexuality, and things like that, we got to talk about the key terms from chapter 12. And just as a reminder, this is not a full list of all the key terms from this chapter. Rather, these are the ones I choose to highlight for today's lecture. You are responsible for all of the terms from chapter 12 for your upcoming exam next week. So, gender is a term that refers to social or cultural distinctions of behaviors that are considered male or female. So, sort of the way folks are labeled when they're born, right? Or, sorry, that's a really, I don't like those definitions. Damn, I have to stop.